morning, everybody, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. You can find us on Facebook Live. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Twitch. We also got some other platforms that we're on Instagram and also on Twitter. We're here to talk about sports, especially with a focus on local sports, your New York, Boston, and Philly area. I'm Mac, your co-host, with also your co-host, the great Jack Hirsch, legendary boxing writer and former president of the National Boxing Writers Association. And today, on Saturday, as we've had for the most part every Saturday, we have Dr. Paul Semendinger. He's an unbelievable Major League Baseball analyst, also a great historian with the Yankees, and he has a great blog over there at Start Spreading the News, where they cover all Yankees all the time, updates, history, all kinds of great stuff over there. So we're glad to have the doc with us. How you doing today, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing great, Mac and Jack. Great to be here with you.
Good morning.
How we doing, Jack? I forgot to say hello to you also. Nothing personal.
That's okay. It's always personal between us, Mac, but I'm used to it by now.
Yes, sir. Well,
good. Yeah.
We have a lot of fun. So let's do a quick sports update, and that's brought to you by Fanatics. Fanatics, if you go over to our website at macandjacksports.com, it's called Mac's Insiders. We have a lot of our guests that come in, our weekly guests, something in there for Jack about his great sports that, he's been a legendary sports writer for, especially in boxing. Well, I should say boxing writer for decades. Very knowledgeable, does a great job. And as I said, he's former president of the National Boxing Association. And he still works writing for Boxing News. There's a link there to that site, so you can check out the articles there. Dr. Paul's on there with to Start Spreading the News blog, and I got a link right to his blog there where you can go there and check out all the information there. It's an incredible blog, and of course all the other insiders. As I mentioned, Fanatics, we have a link over there where you can go right to their store, and you can get all your teams' jerseys, hats, all their apparel. And with Christmas coming, it's a great place to go. And we also have bstbreaks.com that also has signed jerseys. And again, with Christmas, birthdays, all that stuff, great places for you to go ahead and get your favorite team's gear. So in the sports updates, Utah Jazz, they have a new owner, 42-year-old tech billionaire, Ryan Smith, Utah native. He used to watch the Jazz games with his grandparents. So he's a hometown guy, a multi-billionaire, and now a new NBA owner, Jack.
Yeah, well, I kind of laughed when you said a new owner who's a billionaire. Is there a sports owner in a major sport now who's not a billionaire? Because if he's not a billionaire, he's risking losing, his fortune he has. And I call it a fortune. It doesn't have to be a billion, but they're all basically billionaires. The Mets are fortunate to have the biggest of all the billionaires, though, in Steve Cohen.
Definitely. I mean, the only other way that you can get that is like what Derek Jeter did down there, where he gets a conglomerate of people together to invest in the team. So either way, it costs a lot of money, Doc, to own any kind of franchise today. So Derek Carr's groin injury may keep him out for the rest of the season. Mariota will be ready to go. What's up with the Carr brothers? I mean, we had Carr that played for the Texans. He got hurt. He got pounded. He went to the Giants as a backup, and now it looked like Derek was going to have a breakout season, and he gets hurt, Jack.
Now, we talk about quarterbacks, but David Carr was the number one overall pick in the draft, ages ago, and he never really became a top-flight quarterback. For the most part, was a career backup. But listen, with Marcus Mariota is a very capable backup for the Raiders. I mean, he was the number 2 overall choice in the draft when he came out of college. Played a number of years as the Tennessee Titans starting quarterback and had a share of success. And it just shows in the NFL, you really have to have a capable backup, a guy with experience, a guy with a lot of upside.
Definitely. Speaking of backups getting a start, Haskins is going to get another start. Dwayne Haskins with the Washington football team. Since Alex Smith got hurt, Jack Haskins gets his opportunity this week.
It just shows you, I mean, he seemed on the way out of Washington. There was a lot of turmoil, and now he's getting a second chance. He played halfway decent last week. He managed the game when he came in for Alex Smith in the second half. And now if he performs well this week in Alex Smith's absence, he shows he's a capable NFL quarterback. And whether he's with the Redskins next year or not is in question. But he'll go somewhere and he'll be given an opportunity.
This is really for both of you, Doc. This comes right under your expertise, too. Now, we all know that the Major League Baseball has recognized the Negro Leagues, the stats, all their achievements. So Mike Freeman takes it a step further. He's an opinion writer for USA Today. In his opinion piece, he says that it's time to pay them, or at least in some cases, pay their surviving families to try to make it equal to what the white leagues were getting, if not for a better word. What is your opinion on that, guys?
Well, it's a sticky situation, really sticky situation. Is it immediate family? Is it a son? Is it a daughter who is deprived? I have an open mind to discussing that. If it's grandchildren, I think it's too far removed, in all honesty, at that point. Also, I want to ask this question. If it's retroactive, the players are major leaguers. And I don't think that's an unfair thing in the slightest, because I think Commissioner Rob Manfred is trying to do a very good thing, because those guys were really unjustly deprived. It was horrible and cruel the way they were treated, not to be allowed to become major leaguers. What about honoring Jackie Robinson's legacy continuing too? Because if it's retroactive, is Jackie Robinson still the first African-American big league player? And what about the records? Josh Gibson reportedly hit about 800 home runs. Does Josh Gibson become the new home run king? The quality in the Negro Leagues, I don't have the slightest doubt, was top of the level, and it was probably as good as the major leaguers that they weren't allowed to compete with. What do we do? I don't profess to know the answers. No one really knows the answers. We all have to sit down, discuss this. Knowledgeable people put our heads together. What's going to be fair? What's not going to be fair? I mean, it takes a lot more discussion. I don't think you could just get emotional and say, well, it should be new records. It shouldn't be new records. The family should get paid. The family shouldn't get paid. Let's sit down and all educate ourselves and discuss it and see if there's some type of answer to those questions.
What do you think, Doc?
Well, I think it's great that they're recognizing that the Negro Leagues were equal to the major leagues and that they are considered a major league. Those guys, through no fault of their own, were deprived of the opportunity to play Major League Baseball. As Jack was saying, when it comes to the numbers, I think they're still working through all that. I'm not sure how the accuracy of all those numbers were in keeping track of all the games. It's my understanding that there's still a significant amount of the games that they don't have the statistics for. Now they're working through all that. And so I think, as Jack says too, then there's questions like, how do you bring the idea that was the major leagues with what's already happened in the major leagues? Like, is Jackie Robinson the first guy to break the color barrier? I think he is. I think it just needs a lot more thought. The one thing that I have seen is that they're counting the games that were played, I believe, through 1948, but not the games after 1948. Right. So they're making certain decisions, and they're not counting certain games, like if they were barnstorming, which makes sense. But then their seasons weren't as long. And the thing that I think they just have to be careful of is, I think we live in an era where people reduce other people's accomplishments down to numbers. You were great because you did this and you hit this many home runs or you won that many games. And one of the things that's special about the Negro Leagues looking back today, not when it was happening, of course, but is the fact that those players have developed these reputations that supersede even the regular Major League Baseball players of the time. Like Jack was saying, did Josh Gibson hit 800 home runs? And the last report that I read said something like, I think they've been able to document 200 home runs or so, or 100 and something home runs. I don't have the exact number in front of me. But what I'm saying is I would hate to see Josh Gibson's accomplishments reduced on the Major League record to 185 home runs, because someday when people are more removed from this, they're going to look at a number like that and say, oh, he only hit that many homers? I guess he wasn't that good. Because we tend to lose sight of the history, and we tend to lose sight of the individual players, and as we just look at numbers. Same thing with Satchel Paige. Like Satchel Paige. Some people say he won more games than Cy Young, right? Like he just won and won and won. He played forever. And I'm not sure how many wins they're going to give him. And I just don't want to see these great legends reduced to numbers that someday people might see as insignificant. They have to do the right thing. They're trying to do the right thing. I also heard that the families, or some of them are still alive, some players, they should immediately put in the pension system.
Right.
But there were players, major league players from the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and even probably into the 70s that also, before these various free agency and pension systems, when they were dealing with the reserve clause, that are still working to get what might be due to them for their efforts. So I think there's a lot of different levels of things that they have to work through. I like Jack's idea of taking the time, not doing this emotionally, and making sure that each of the decisions make sense and that these players get recognized for what they did. That was great, because what they did was great.
Yeah, I want to hear something interesting. I remember Howard Cosell a half century ago, okay? When Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner, decided that it's going to be a wing in Cooperstown for the players in the Negro Leagues. And Howard Cosell thought it was really wonderful. Jackie Robinson was still alive a couple of years before his death, thought it was wrong, saying they should just get put in the regular Hall of Fame. And Howard Cosell at the time saying, this is a great first step. We should be very happy with what's being done, a step at a time. And it's funny that the next step is a half century later, so when you talk about progress or whatever. But what Doc was saying, Mac, I just want to say one thing. I know, and then I'll make it quick. Let's say someone is unjustly incarcerated, and we find out years later they served X amount of years in prison, and then they're allowed to get a civil service job, being a police officer, school teacher, so on. I think their pension should be retroactive. From the years they were incarcerated, they should be given credit for what was taken away from them. But I don't know would the courts allow that. But
well, you mean if they're found innocent?
If they're found right, they're not getting. They found out they were unjustly incarcerated. So you can make this comparison to the players in the Negro leagues in the sense they were unjustly incarcerated, not to be allowed in big league baseball.
Well, baseball, guys, is really more about stats and history than probably any other sport. I mean, they always talk about the stats. The question I have then is, we talked just about, Gibson and Satchel Paige. I mean, how are they going to, if there's no records of this, are we going to go based off what was seen, or are they going to take the actual, the statistics that were kept back then in the Negro Leagues and use them? Because there could be more home runs that were recorded, or it could be exaggerated. So who's to determine that? I mean, are they going to set up a committee? This sounds like it could be a real big thing and will take a lot of time.
I think Doc made a point that I didn't think about, and I'm thinking about now, and a very good point. In the case of Josh Gibson, if they go through all the records and they can document, let's say, 288 home runs, I'm just throwing out a number. What about my grandsons years later? They go to the record book. They'll say, he was a good player, not so great, so on. So those statistics kind of fool people unless they know the real story. And future generations, unfortunately, are very stat oriented. We're very stat oriented. We try not to be, but
Right.
we are. But look, if you combine leagues, look at Ichiro. Does he have more hits than Pete Rose if you count the Japanese league? There was a dispute going on. I think he has a little less. But Pete Rose was annoyed when they were saying Ichiro is close to breaking his hit record if you count hits in the Japanese league. Pete Rose then said, well, then I can count my minor league hits.
Yeah, right.
So,
I mean, I guess that's not a bad point. I mean, minor league, I guess, is still professional. They're getting paid to play. I mean, see, I think it comes down to interpretation. And the only thing I'm worried about is it's either lessened because there wasn't as many stats kept, or it's exaggerated because for some reason they want to make the player, I'm not going to say better than what he was, but more talk about the legend than about what actually happened. And that's the two things I worry about with something like this. So, guys, let's get to our Yankees poll question and the trivia question. So, folks, in our Yankees poll question, as you know, I go out and I put a poll out in 3 different Yankees groups, and I ask them a question for their opinion. And we've got some incredible answers, and I think we know why the answers were given the way they were. So this is the question I posed to those 3 groups. I said, if there was a critical game during the season and you needed one manager to coach the team for that win in Yankee history, who would you pick? And these were the 3 choices I gave them: Casey Stengel, Billy Martin, or Joe Torre. And I want to know what you guys think before I give you the answer.
well, that's an easy one for me. You want to go first, Doc? For me, it's an easy one.
That's a hard one for me. Casey won more World Series. I think the key there is the fact that you just have to win one game. And if it's just winning one game, the guy who probably got the most out of his players in a short term before he drove everybody crazy and was self-destructive was Billy Martin. So I guess in that scenario, you'd have to take Billy Martin. Would I want Billy Martin as my manager over Casey Stengel or Joe Torre for the long haul or for any significant period of time? I wouldn't. But I guess if you were just saying I need a guy to rally troops for one game and win, I think you'd have to pick Billy Martin.
Well, let me ask you this. You said long term. Why wouldn't you want Billy Martin to be your manager for the long term? Is it his personality that you couldn't be able to take? Or are we talking strictly baseball? Are we talking about character, how he'd be acting, him being a loose cannon?
And I think that's all part of it, right? Billy, the older he got too, the more self-destructive he became.
Yeah.
And he fought with his players, and he created a clubhouse that was not conducive to winning over a long period of time. He was managing a lot of different teams. He brought a lot of teams around. His history of success when first taking over a team was unbelievable. He would take a second division club and make them very successful. But all of that was short-lived. It was not a productive way to bring a team's success. So, yeah, Billy Martin never was able to sustain it anywhere for a long period of time, and that because of those various character issues that were part of who he was as his personality.
Yeah, my answer would be Billy Martin, but I have to agree with Doc. If I were Nona, I couldn't take Billy Martin beyond the season. I mean, just too much turmoil and so on. And he had a major drinking problem that it seemed he never really addressed for his whole life. And he died a violent death that I don't have to get into, would constantly be fighting with his players. But of the 3 managers, Joe Torre, Casey Stengel, and Billy Martin, we also have to look how they did with other teams. Casey came to the Mets. He was an old guy, so on, and he was comical. The media loved him. The fans loved him when he came to the Mets. But they were horrible. I mean, he didn't do anything for the Mets as a manager to improve him at all. I mean, he was great at telling jokes. And Joe Torre really wasn't a successful manager in his other places. I know they went to the playoffs one year with the Atlanta Braves, and he really was quite an average manager. He won when he came to the Yankees, and even though Joe Torre was the perfect manager for those Yankee teams, had the greatest personality, I don't think you would have gotten anyone better to manage those Yankee teams than Joe Torre. You could have gotten a number of guys just as good. Had Buck Showalter not been fired, they would have won with Buck Showalter those World Series. I mean, listen, they would have won with Doc as the manager. With you, Mac, they may have gotten bumped in the playoffs.
Yeah, we would have got
less. I don't know.
We lucky to make the playoffs.
No, Torre was excellent.
I agree with both of you. I agree with both of you. If I had one critical game to win, it definitely would be Billy Martin. I think he was perhaps, if not the best, one of the best field managers in the game. He made a lot of right moves at a lot of right times. And as Doc said, he brought a lot of teams that weren't as talented into the playoffs. And I think for that one game, I think Billy Martin would have done it. I think Casey Stengel and Joe Torre were the beneficiary of really good teams too. I mean, it's they weren't taking a team that was in the bottom and bringing them to the top. So if it was for one critical game, I agree with you both. I would take Billy Martin. Of course, the poll, as again that we found out, is more because of the age of the fans. And Joe Torre was first, Billy Martin second, and Casey Stengel third. So that was very interesting.
I've got a question for both of you guys. Let me ask a question. Make believe you both were a player. Who would you want to play for the most out of the three?
I think that's easy. I think it's Joe Torre. Casey Stengel was a great manager, and Casey Stengel was able to make his teams great because he did things that were unconventional. He did a lot of platooning. He batted. He used Whitey Ford in original ways, using him only against other teams' best pitchers and things like that. And his history of success with the Yankees is unparalleled. 5 consecutive World Series, and then he won a whole bunch after that as well. But I don't know if outside of certain players he was as beloved as Joe Torre seems to have been. So if you're asking me which one if I'm a player, Torre has a great history of success with the Yankees, and it just seems like he was universally loved and respected by all his players. And so if I was a player, that's who I'd want to play for.
Well, the greatest player manager, or the greatest manager that the players loved the most, who they run through a brick wall for, was actually not on the list, Ralph Houck. Yeah. Everyone loved Ralph Houck, all of his players. Once in a while, players would complain about Joe Torre. Once in a while. I don't know how credible it would be, like Gary Sheffield, Kenny Lofton, whatever. So Joe Torre wasn't perfect, but he was very popular. Jeter loved him. Posada, Bernie Williams, they all respected him tremendously. But Ralph Houck was the ultimate player's manager. I mean, you never heard a negative thing. Even when Ralph Houck went to the Boston Red Sox and became their manager for a little while, Carl Yastrzemski loved him there. Everyone who played for Ralph Houck just about said he was the best manager they played for. Mickey Mantle said it. They run through a brick wall for him.
Well, if I had a choice, guys, and I wanted to play for 1 year for one manager, it would definitely be Billy Martin, because I would love
to. But if he didn't like you, Mac, look out. If he didn't like you, you'd have major problems. Okay?
Probably so.
Like you, some of his players loved him. Listen, Doc, Willie Randolph loved Billy Martin.
Ricky Hendrickson loved him.
Herman Munson, a lot of guys, they loved Billy Martin.
Yeah.
Sparky Lyle, I'm not sure about Guidry. Did you say Guidry?
I think Guidry, I believe he did. And I think Guidry had his best seasons. Yeah, underneath
under Billy Martin. The 25-3 season was under.
Oh, that was half with Billy and half with Bob Lemon. But
Bob Lemon, right.
I'm not sure. I think you may have. I think Guidry once, said something about Billy Martin. He tries to avoid him. Listen,
Oh, is
Goose
that true?
Gossage,
Okay.
Goose Gossage once said before the trivia question, I just want to say that when he was with, oh wow, did it happen with the Yankees or not? I don't remember the team. I shouldn't say, but Billy Martin once ordered him to hit a batter in the head, and he refused to do it.
I don't know. That's what he says. I don't know. It could be. Billy Martin was a very, very tough and aggressive manager. So here's our trivia question. This is the Yankees trivia question. And so here goes, guys. This is from the book I told you about early before the show called The Rising of a Franchise, a great book about the beginnings of the New York Yankees. So this is the trivia question for you. What controversy happened in 1909 with the Yankee organization? It was a major controversy, guys.
I think
I
I'm
have to guess.
stumped. Let me just think a second. I don't think I'm going to get them. Giving myself a few seconds to see if something pops into my head. 1909. If I had to take a crazy guess, it would be building a stadium, an issue. That's about all I could think of. But I'm stumped.
What do you got, Doc? Anything?
The only thing I can come up with is it had something to do with Hal Chase, the first baseman who was accused credibly, I believe, throughout his career of throwing games and gambling on ball games.
Well, that's a good one, but that's not the answer.
I didn't know that. At least I learned something with this answer here.
So in 1909, the Major League Baseball at the time came out and warned the Yankees at the end of the season. It seemed the Yankees were 82-55 at home and 55-51 in road games. And during the pennant race versus the Detroit Tigers, the trainer from the Detroit Tigers saw a hole in the fence and looked like a guy with binoculars. The manager of the Detroit Tigers had him go out and check it. His name was Hugh Jennings. He sent Bill Donovan out there to check the hole in the fence. He couldn't get over the fence because at the time there was barbed wire across the top of the fence, but he fouled the fence down. And he found a place where he could get over the fence, and a guy ran out of what looked like a coop. And in that coop, there was a lever that controlled the H, the crossbar of an H, and one of the advertisement billboards they had up there, and it could move the lever. And what was found out is that he was checking to see what the signs were, and the code was found out that different angles for different pitches to the batters, where it would be moved certain directions for curveballs, fastballs, and changeups. Other teams found a half-eaten apple in the sandwich open and a bottle of beer in that coop. So what happened was the AL owners essentially said to Stallings, the manager of the Yankees, "We know what you did, and don't ever do it again." So that was the big spy game.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, it does, doesn't it? So it's always been part of the game, guys, and I think it's always been being done in one form or another. So
did they even have a commissioner then?
I think there was a commissioner back.
Landis, he wouldn't have.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember.
I don't think Landis was appointed till after the Black Sox.
Right.
But
there was a president of the American League, right? Like Van Johnson, right? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't maybe officially called a commissioner, but there was somebody had to be running that thing. Everybody runs the organization. I can't think of a name right now.
I think his name was Van Johnson, and he ran the American League. No,
it sounds right, Doc. It sounds right. So
look it up.
Go right ahead. And what we're gonna do, Doc? How long can you stay with us this morning?
I've got a little while longer today. Today I'm good.
Okay, excellent. So in our debate, Jack, we're gonna start off. What was the worst contract in locals history, meaning New York, Boston, and Philly? And we both picked baseball. So, Jack, you're up first for this part of the debate.
Okay, when you talk about a contract, a bad contract, there are two types of bad contracts. The one, obviously, that turns out bad where the player doesn't perform. And also the one where you know you shouldn't give him the money in the years, but you do it anyway. That's a bad contract. In some cases, it makes sense to sign a guy. We were talking, I think, before the show. For those listeners out there, we actually do sometimes talk sports before the show because we love it. And we were talking about DJ LeMayo, and I was saying the way I think the Yankees could be doing a better job, getting the deal done with him and so on. But in the case of DJ LeMayo, let's say they give him the money, they give him whatever amount of years, whatever deal they give him, and then he hits 210 for the next 4 or 5 years. Is that a bad contract? No, it would have turned out bad in his performance. But there's certain contracts, the moment it gets signed, it's doomed for failure. It's stupidity, so on. And I'm not talking about a Carl Pavano contract. That wasn't a bad contract when they gave him a 4-year deal for about $40 million. No one knew he would get hurt that way or for whatever reason wasn't pitching. Jacoby Ellsbury, we know they were overpaying a bit, giving him a 7-year deal, but he was expected to be a heck of a good player, maybe make 3 All-Star teams in 7 years. And he wasn't going to be a flop, even though they were going to overpay him. But he was hurt. He wasn't worth it. Okay, you could call that a bad contract the way it turned out. But the worst contract that I ever saw that got me sick was after the 2007 season. A-Rod opted out of the contract he had with the Yankees that he originally signed with Texas. He opted out. So, the way he went about it, so on, was very distasteful. He opted out during the World Series when the Red Sox were playing that year. You don't opt out during the World Series, put yourself in the news. And the Yankees had a lot of difficulty with him. He wasn't working out a deal before then. So at that point, the Yankees could have moved on from him because they'd given him a nice offer originally. So A-Rod eventually comes back hat in hand to apologize because Scott Boras was A-Rod's agent, and Scott Boras is one agent I wouldn't want to deal with if I was an owner. I might X him off my list and let the players know. But the point is, he comes back to them and he's age 31, I believe. So what did the Yankees do? Randy Levine especially. Who is the idiot who signs him to a 10-year deal to take him to age 41? The Yankees had the leverage. The Yankees had all the leverage over A-Rod. If anything, when he came back to them and apologized, they could have said, we accept your apology, A-Rod, but we're slashing some money off the deal now because that deal is in the past. You rejected it. This is a new deal. Take it or leave it. Go play for the Detroit Tigers. A-Rod was coming back to the Yankees at that point no matter what. He desperately wanted to be here. He screwed up big time. So what did they do? They signed him to a 10-year deal. The last 2-3 years, he was useless on the deal. At least they were paying him something like about, I don't know, maybe Doc could tell me the amount, 60, 70, 80 million dollars for basically not playing at the end, for being an advisor. An advisor? What makes A-Rod so knowledgeable? You hear him on Sunday Night Baseball screwing up some things. He loves the game, yeah. He's not exactly the ultimate winner, is he? I mean, come on, this is A-Rod we're talking about. He might be a nice fella to hang out with, pleasant, not a snob. And what did the Yankees do? They signed this crazy $275 million 10-year contract to take him up to age 41, where he's doomed on the back end of the contract not to do that well because they have visions of him breaking the home run record, the Yankees. Oh, we're going to cash in the money, him breaking the record. They don't even consider the steroid issue the guy's on, that even if he was going to break the record, which he didn't come close to breaking at the end, it was going to be tainted with the steroids. And then there's the Jeter factor after that. A-Rod's under contract with the Yankees, that crazy deal. Jeter becomes a free agent. Now they're playing hardball with Jeter in the press when they weren't doing with A-Rod. The guy who's behaved himself has been the ultimate Yankee, the ultimate fan favorite, as loyal to the organization as could be, and they're treating him, Jeter, disrespect. They're showing him a lack of respect. But A-Rod, they're treating like he's Joe DiMaggio or someone. I mean, sickening, the worst contract I've ever seen.
Well, first, Jack, we're not talking about Derek Jeter. We're talking about A-Rod. Whatever how the Yankees treated Jeter is how the Yankees treated Jeter. That's their fault. That has nothing to do with A-Rod. So I agree with you. I take a player is a worth amount of money and the time spent. And while the Yankees sure didn't get their money's worth for A-Rod in hundreds of millions of dollars, but let's look at some of his stats, Jack. In 2004, I'm go back a little bit. 36 home runs. In 2005, 321 average, 48 home runs, leading the major league. 2006, 35 home runs, 121 RBIs. In 2007, 35 home runs, 100 runs scored and 100 RBIs. Voted American League MVP. In 2008, 302 average, 35 home runs, 103 RBIs. 2009, against the Phillies, he wins the Babe Ruth Award, the postseason MVP with 365 average, 6 home runs, 18 RBIs. In his contract to the Yankees, he drove, as part being the Yankees, over 2,000 RBIs, 3,000 hits, over 666 home runs. And 2 days before his 40th birthday, became the 5th oldest in Yankee player to hit 3 home runs in one game versus the Twins. Now, I agree he was overpaid, and there's a lot of players out there overpaid. I'm talking about you signing a contract and you proving that you at least deserve part of that contract. So that being said, Jack, let's look at Yoenis Cespedes.
I just say one thing, cut in 1 second. I'll make it quick. You're naming years before he signed that Yankee 10-year contract. He signed it after the 2007 season. It doesn't matter what he did.
I just said 2008, 2009, 2007. I just gave you the stats for that, Jack. I'm not saying before. I went back a little bit. I'm talking about with the Yankees, Jack. He won the Babe Ruth Award for the MVP in the World Series. I mean, that he did while he was a Yankee. So that being said, Jack, let's look at Yoenis Cespedes of the Mets and his worth versus production. The Mets signed him to a huge contract, over $20 million a year with a no trade clause, Jack. So they want to trade him, he couldn't be traded anyway. In 2016, he does okay. He plays 132 games, played very good, but not up to a superstar level, not 300. Home runs weren't bad, but not 40 home runs. I mean, $20 million a year. In 2017, he drops off because he doesn't play, Jack. He gets injured, but he still gets paid. In 2018, only 81 games, Jack. And 2019, he was out for the season with that injury. In 2020, he only plays 8 games. And while he's still under contract, Jack, he decides to take off. I mean, he couldn't run anymore. He couldn't field anymore. He couldn't hit anymore. And he just leaves. Nobody knows where he is.
Mac, the Mets didn't get their money's worth.
Wait a minute, Jack. The team is looking for him, Jack. They have no idea where Cespedes went. So Cespedes, a few days later at his leisure, he decides to message the team. He's on an airplane and he's flying around the world, having a great time, while his team is out there trying to win games. Now, there's been a lot of players, Jack, in the history that aren't paid, have been overpaid. We know that they're being overpaid right now. And DJ LeMahieu will be overpaid if they sign him to that huge contract. There's no doubt in my mind. The point is, when you look at a contract and you have a no trade clause in it and you're out for 1 year, you still get paid. All right. They cut his price, but he still made millions of dollars. And then he only plays 8 games, Jack. And then he leaves. I mean, what kind of player does that, Jack? Yoenis Cespedes, by far, Jack, is the worst contract in Locals history.
Doug can answer this question as well that I'm going to ask you. Obviously, the Mets didn't get their money's worth on the Cespedes contract. It turned out to be a terrible contract. We can all agree on that. At the time Cespedes signed the contract, Were the Mets wrong to sign him to that contract? Was it a viable signing at the time? That's what I'm judging, because A-Rod signing him to that deal made no sense at the time, a 10-year deal. And Brian Cashman was against the A-Rod signing. That came from the high ups. Cespedes got a 4-year deal. Did it make sense at the time? That's what I want to ask you two.
I don't think so, Jack, because I don't think he was a superstar. I think he was a very good player. I don't think he was worth $30 million a year. And it turned out that he didn't even play for the full
Well, he
time.
wasn't getting $30 million a year. It's getting like 22 and a half or so.
29.5, Jack. I mean, I looked up the numbers, about 29.5 or 22 and it went up to 29. And blah,
Okay, maybe I'm wrong on some of my talk. Doc, what do you think this said? You have to infringe in Met territory now.
Yes, I think the worst contract that the Mets or the Yankees ever gave out is the one that the Mets are still paying for. And you're talking about a guy who wasn't really worth the big money at the time. And I think you can make an argument that Bobby Bonilla, just have his stats in front of me, was a very nice player. But I don't know if he was an MVP type of player, though I'm looking, he did get a couple of MVP votes the 2 years before he came to the Mets, but I don't know if the people considered him a transcendent player. And, they signed him to that contract. He didn't do great in New York. And that was in 1992. And now we're in 2020 and they're still paying that contract because of some of the deals and the extensions they made or the deferring of the payments and all that. That has to be the worst trade ever.
What did we think of that, Mac?
I think. Listen, I think
that's a good one.
I think $1 million right now isn't worth $1 million it was way back when. So I mean, listen, he's not playing; he's getting $1 million a year, which is
1.2 million. And Baltimore was paying him $500,000 a year, I think, through 2020.
Yeah.
That guy had the best agent.
Very smart man, very smart agent, definitely. I mean, yeah, I guess you could make an argument that's one of the worst contracts in the history of baseball, for God's sakes. I mean, to get a contract like that. But hey, maybe the Mets at the time, or maybe another team at the time, thought that was a heck of a deal. Paying $1 million a year instead of paying all that money up front. Maybe it worked out for the team too. I don't know. So anyway, so. Well, great. I didn't even think of that, Doc. Great.
Yeah. Well, Steve Cohen's going to get his money back for the Met organization because to him it's a big joke. He's going to have a Bobby Bonilla days kind of promoted.
Sure.
He's brilliant. That's a brilliant idea.
It's brilliant. It's great, and it makes it brings humor to what was a terrible decision. He's going to fix it all, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, so the second thing we're going to be debating, Doc, and you definitely have some input on this. And Jack, you're going yes on this one about Joe DiMaggio, right? So will Joe DiMaggio's 56-game record ever be broken? And the easy answer to that is no. Pete Rose, perhaps the best hitter in baseball history, couldn't do it. Ted Williams, considered the best baseball hitter in history, couldn't do it. Rod Carew, Wade Boggs, Kirby Puckett, Carl Yastrzemski, the best hitters in baseball's history couldn't do it. So when he went hitless in that one game, which is very important to mention, it was a great defensive play that stopped that hitting streak. Joe went on another 14-game hitting streak. And I'll tell you, guys, it takes a certain type of person to have a record like that. I mean, some batters in history have higher career batting averages. Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Ted Williams. But to hit for 56 consecutive games, you have to be cool. Under pressure. You have to be able to concentrate while things are going around you, all the publicity. And, in today's world, Jack, they don't hit for base hits anymore. There are very few people that even try that anymore. So you got people up there trying to drive the ball out or striking out. There's a few. I mean, we mentioned DJ LeMahieu. He does hit the ball the other way, but he's one of a dying breed. Even with the team shifts on and stuff, they still can't hit the ball the other way. I think a bunt is even still hit, if I'm correct. I mean, they don't even do that anymore. So to even believe that today's baseball players could come close to 56 games is very wishful thinking, Jeff. I don't see it ever happening.
It's hard for me to debate this saying yes, because I remember in 1970, Elston Howard was saying this is a record, DiMaggio's hitting record, it'll never be broken. And a half century later, the closest anyone has come has been Pete Rose hitting in 44 games in a row, and that's double digits less. That's 12 games less. Actually, when DiMaggio's 56 game hitting streak was broken, the Indian third baseman Ken Keltner reportedly robbed him twice. I mean, I never saw a tape. Can you imagine had he not made one of those plays and DiMaggio gotten a hit, and he hit in 16 games in a row after the streak was broken? Had he hit in 73 games in a row, that would have been obscene. Obscene. That would have been, forget breaking that record, don't even call it a record, put it ahead of a record, put it, bottle it up and don't let anyone chase it, make a new hit record, because that would be so ridiculously out of reach. It's hard for me to make an argument. I feel some way, somehow it will. Joe DiMaggio himself always felt that record was going to be broken. If Joe D could come back to life now, let's make believe, what's the first thing he would probably do? Want to check on his hit record. Did anyone break my record? And when they tell him no, he'd probably be like a little stunned and surprised. No one broke my record. I still have my record. There was this player, maybe Doc, Mac, you or Doc, remember the name on the Phillies? When he got up to 37 games in a row, I think one of DiMaggio's relatives, or someone who was a brother, whatever, who was alive, someone, I'm not sure, was saying, well, you can't count it if he breaks the record because it's not all done in one season. To me, it's not a seasonal record. It's a consecutive hit record. To me, and I think we both maybe agree, it carries over. It's not like a home run record, the most in the season. It's consecutive, game hitting streak. I just feel the lack of starting pitching is a little like spotty in the big leagues. We might have expansion with the DH coming in that in the National League. That might, that's going to allow an extra quality hitter in the lineup. It's a hard one to break. I feel one way or another, someone is going to finally, go on a tear. You mentioned Mac DJ LeMayo. He's a perfect candidate, a guy who could hit to all fields. A pull hitter's never going to break that record. But I think when we judge records, any record, this is to me, the greatest records in sports are the ones that last the longest. And DiMaggio's is going to be 80 years this year, 80 years or so. And how many records last 80 years? So that's how we should judge records, how long the record has been held. I think that sometimes is a greater criteria for the greatness than the actual record itself, how long the person held it.
I like that. I like that perspective where you look at a record and you say how long it was held for, and that gives it some type of additional legitimacy. That's actually an interesting point, and it's very valued. Do I think somebody can break DiMaggio's record? I'm going to agree with Jack. I think they can, because I think most records are just a moment of time. And will there be a player who comes around who has a skill set that allows him to get a lot of hits? As Jack mentioned, also, if they expand baseball and dilute starting pitching that much more, you look at like the 1961 season when they expanded baseball, and that's when Roger Maris broke the record. But I'm going to turn to a different record that, for forever everyone said was unbreakable, and that was Lou Gehrig playing in 2,130 consecutive games. Nobody thought that could be touched because nobody would ever play in that many games. And even what happened during that was the advent of free agency, and they said, oh, well, the players aren't as dedicated anymore. They're not as tough as they used to be. And then all of a sudden, Cal Ripken Jr. breaks Lou Gehrig's record. I think there's a sense that there are records that can be broken, and 56 games is probably unlikely, but to say it's impossible, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I think it's highly unlikely, but there is a possibility that it could happen. And You know what? Then DiMaggio says I had my record for 80 or 85 or 100 years, and that's very impressive because the game also evolves and changes, and maybe there is a guy who always hits against the shift or is really fast and can get a lot of bunt hits, or he's a player who has a skill set that none of us can even consider at this point because of the fact that the game keeps changing.
Well, there's two things I want to say to both of those points. One, while you got to be talented to play in the Major League Baseball, you don't have to have a skill set to play through injury. You know, I mean, that record should have been broken probably before it was. I believe that it takes a skill set and a certain type of person to hit in 56 games straight. I don't think there's that person out there anymore, Doc or Jack. I really don't. I mean, we could say the game changes and all that stuff. The game has become more of a social. I should say the social network is involved more in sports than it ever has been, and there's more me, I, and things are, and the publicity you get is 3 times the amount of publicity they had back then. If you want to be honest, the pressure to play today, the pressure you can imagine, is 3 times harder than it was back then. Some is the own player's fault, some is because of the media, and to be that cool. And like I said, we had hitters throughout history that have better averages than Joe DiMaggio. They were maybe Ted Williams was even a better hitter than Joe DiMaggio. And you can go up to Rod Carew, Wade Boggs, even to Puckett. As I said, these were all great hitters. But to hit when it gets to that 40 game, that 50 game, to keep that consecutive hitting record game going, the pressure's got to be immense. And DiMaggio being in New York, I mean, the media capital of the world, it was still a lot of pressure back then, but I don't think as much pressure it is now. And the way that the batters are taught to hit now, and I don't think it's going to get any better, guys, they're taught to hit a home run and to drive the ball. They're taught that in the minor leagues. They're taught that in high school. They're not taught to just hit the ball and make contact anymore. So for that reason, I don't believe it'll ever happen, guys.
But Mac, you mentioned something about bunting before. Pete Rose did attempt some bunts during his 44-game hitting streak. And when Joe DiMaggio was asked about it, he got a little testy at the time. He said, well, I never bunted. How do you guys feel about this? If someone was to break the record, let's say hitting 57 consecutive games, but they got a few of those games, they got one hit and they actually bunted. Would you really look at it quite the same way? Because to me, it would bother me a little bit, just a little bit, you know, if a guy bunted to get on and broke the record that way.
I wouldn't. I'm going to give you a controversial an answer you're not going to like. I wouldn't have a problem with it. If you can get a base hit and you got your base hit, you got your base hit, right? You know, if you did it on the 57th game or the 56th game, you know, it's a little bit like, come on. But if game 33 and 17, that the player got a bunt hit as part of the streak, as they were trying to do what they could to help their team win. I mean, if you're a ball player and that's your skill set and you're really good at bunting and you're fast and you can get base hits that way, why would you not do that? Just to try to prove a point?
But if your team is up 8-0 and you're hitting 55 games in a row and it's your last at bat.
Well, I think that's a little different of a scenario. I think at that point, you know, but Lou Gehrig, I think, played in virtually every single game and played most every game. But there were a couple times when they batted him at the end of that streak, first in the lineup, and an away game, he had his at bat, and then they sat him down. Right. And Cal Ripken Jr. made the point that, you know, he really played shortstop, which was a tougher position, a more demanding position.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is there are factors that play into this, and no one ever would have thought Cal Ripken Jr. could play in that many games, and he did. And again, I don't think any player right now is going to be threatening Joe DiMaggio's record, but we don't know the players who are coming up in the next 5 years, 10 years, and again, how the game's going to change.
That's a good point. You know, to add on to that bunt for a single as a base hit, there are a lot of cheap base hits go off the hands that barely go over, you know, into the outfield. That's not really a good hit, but it's still a hit. It found the hole. It's still a hit, and it still either helps your team win or whatever the case
And
may
watch DJ LeMayo resign with the Yankees and have a 35-game hitting streak this year.
Well, it's possible. It's very possible. We got Doc. Are you good to go for one more debate? We're going to cut to a quick break first, and get a little get my voice to rest here. As you hear, I'm getting raspy right now, so we're going to go ahead and try to get a quick break in here, and we'll be back on the other side. More debates coming up, and we're going to debate coming up after this, folks. The best rookie season in the locals' history: New York, Boston, or Philly. So that will be where we're at next. So stick with us, and we'll be right back after these messages.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say, no, I have too much respect for my family and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma.
I love you too. Okay, how about tasting the stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Info Line. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Killed.
Yeah, well, Kyle's not here. No. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, Bill, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. This is our Saturday show where me and Jack Hirsch debate all sports topics, especially the locals from New York, Boston, and Philly. And we're on from 8 to 10 a.m. Wednesday through Sunday. Today we have the pleasure of having Dr. Paul Semendinger with us, unbelievable Major League Baseball analyst, and especially with the Yankees. check out his blog at Start Spreading the News, where they have a tremendous blog there about the Yankees with all their updates, history, and all the news about the Yankees. He has things going on all the time over there. Doc, tell us a little bit about the blog, if you would. Oh, Doc, did you turn off your mic, Doc? You turned off your mic. Can't hear you right now. Jack, can you? Are you
You
good?
hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Try
Okay.
one more.
See if. Oh, why
Doc-
don't know what happened?
No, I can't hear him.
The one guy that makes sense on this podcast gets muted.
All right. We're back.
Yes, you are, Doc.
Thank
So
you.
tell us a little bit about your blog, Doc.
So Start Spreading the News is a Yankees blog, and we focus on the Yankees. We have a lot of opinion pieces. We have 4 features every day. We have an article that goes up at 6, 10, 1, and 4 during the week. We also have a baseball card trivia at noon. We have a tweet of the day at 3. On Wednesday nights, we replay a Yankees game with our Wednesday night classics. On Sunday night, we do a fun a Yankee documentary or something like that. These obviously stream from YouTube. We don't create them ourselves. On Thursdays, we interview famous people as part of the Start Spreading the News interview series. We do a mailbag on Fridays. So it's full of great articles, great writers. We have a phenomenal staff of people. We have a great loyal following. And I think we put up quality content, probably more quality content on a consistent basis than most blogs or websites. And not a whole lot of advertising on there either. So, you go to a lot of web pages and articles are blocked and you can't get to them. We don't do that. You go to a lot of web pages and you're constantly clicking off all sorts of banner ads. We don't have anything like that. It's really us doing our part to promote the Yankees, promote baseball, share our love of the game, and make it accessible for everyone and create a great community of baseball fans and Yankee fans. So that's Start Spreading the News.
It's a tremendous site. I've been there a few times, and you guys do a heck of a job there. Dr. Paul is also an award-winning author. I'm going to let him talk about his book a little bit, Scattering the Ashes. I mean, it's a great book. I do have a copy. He has it. I got mine up here too, Doc. So I got your book also. It's a tremendous story, and just a quick synopsis of that document.
Thank you. Scattering the Ashes is the story of Sam Holmes, a young man. He's a school teacher. The summer has just dawned. He's thinking of a great summer that he's going to have spending time doing whatever he wants. He spent time every day visiting his father in a assisted living facility, and then his father tragically passes away suddenly. And when he's getting the meeting with the attorney to decide, how to break up the estate and find out all that, he realizes that his father has left him a very strange and original request that he needs to go on a series of journeys to scatter his father's ashes at places that had been meaningful to Sam and he over the courses of their lives. And so it becomes an opportunity for Sam to grieve actually over the course of a year as he reflects on his father's passing. It's something he didn't want to do, but it's also a coming of age for an adult type of novel where he finds himself as he goes on his journeys to spread his father's ashes. The other unique thing is after he finishes one task, his dad just didn't give him a list. He has to go back to the attorney who gives him a letter that his father had written before he had passed away that talks about their lives together. And the letters serve to help guide him even in the struggles that he's experiencing at the time. So it's a great novel. There's a lot of baseball in there. He's a marathon runner. It's very spiritual. And, all the feedback, well, not all the feedback, but the majority of the feedback has been very, very positive. People have loved the book. It's won a couple of awards, and I'm very proud. Yes, thank you.
Excellent, Doc. On our last discussion, we did have a comment in from Jeffrey Rubin, said he wouldn't be upset at a butt single to attempt to continue a hitting streak, but he did hate Kessinger's bunting in the 9th inning against Seaver in the imperfect game. So, I mean, that's something that has happened too, that I've seen in the history of baseball, where there is a no-hitter going on and somebody does try to lay down the
Well,
butt.
if it's a 1-0 game and his team's behind, that makes it a little different. I mean, the goal is to win the game. I mean, if the Mets are up 5-0, I don't recall the score of that game at that point, but but the score to me has a lot to do with it.
That's a good point. Very good point. So I agree. If you're trying to get a run, I have no problem with you bunting. I don't care if it's a perfect game, two-hitter or no-hitter. If you're trying to get on base to win the game, I have no problem.
I got to tell you something. Why Pedro Martinez is so despised, and he's the latest of the kind of, I don't want to say bad guys because he might be a nice person, but they get these broadcast positions. We were talking about it the other day, Mac. When Mike Mussina's perfect game was broken up by Carl Everett, Pedro Martinez, he's standing by the top of the dugout watching intently because it's high drama. When Everett gets the hit, he's waving and he's all happy about it. Okay, but there should be a bond of a fellow pitcher, the disappointment that he's going through. And if you're happy a teammate got a hit and broke up the perfect game because you're thinking he could steal a little of your thunder one way or the other, keep it inside. Don't act that way outwardly. So that's why Pedro Martinez, he kind of brought a little of this abuse upon himself.
Yeah, I would agree with that to a point. I mean, I imagine you got to root for your team too, Jack. But I don't remember the score of that game either. And if the Red Sox were still had a chance at winning that game,
No, I think Yankees were far ahead in that game, as I recall.
okay.
With Mussina, yeah.
So Jack, best rookie season in New York, Boston, and Philly area. And remember, that includes the Giants, the New York Giants baseball team, and the Brooklyn Dodgers. So who do you got for the best rookie season?
Well, that includes the Phillies and the Red Sox.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
yeah. When I was a kid, the big question was, who would you rather have? Willie Mays or Sandy Koufax was one of the big questions, which would compare great pitcher against a great position player. In those days, okay, back in the day, the position players seemed to always win out. And now in this day and age where pitching's at a premium, I guess pitching would probably win out. But when we talk about the best rookie year, are we talking about who made the biggest buzz? I mean, if you talk throughout Major League Baseball, you have pitchers like Mark the Bird Fidrich talking to the ball. He was a national phenomenon, Mark the Bird Fidrich. He was comedy, entertainment, and a heck of a good pitcher. A heck of a great rookie. Vida Blue, he was a sensation. He came on the scene, so on. And we have one that you're probably going to talk about, who I'm not going to name, from New York. But the best rookie I ever saw in my lifetime, and how he somehow hit a bump on the road, it isn't going to make the Hall of Fame, probably is never going to be in the Hall of Fame, would be Freddie Lynn for the 1975 Boston Red Sox. Their center fielder. I've never seen a rookie as good. He had everything, Fred Lynn. He was like the perfect player just about. He hit .331, knocked in 105 runs. He had 21 home runs, which, keep in mind, in 1975 is the equivalent of closer to 30 today. He was a Rookie of the Year that year. He won the Gold Glove Award because he was a phenomenal defensive center fielder, phenomenal. And he was the league MVP. He did it all. he was the second coming of Carl Yastrzemski's Triple Crown year, or close to what Yaz did in 1967. Freddie Lynn was an absolute superstar. Just watching the guy, he had greatness written all over him. Now, he wound up having a long career. He played for 4 different teams, and he had a very good career, good career. But it didn't turn out to quite be the Hall of Fame career, which is ironic because we witnessed something late on with Donnie Mattingly. He was a lock for the Hall of Fame, yet he never quite arrived there. Maybe someday. But Freddie Lynn, best all-around rookie that I ever saw, play. Best year, 1975. And they nearly won the World Series. They lost to the Big Red Machine in 7 games, 4-3 in the 7th game of that World Series.
Listen, Jack, that's a heck of a pick. I think Fred Lynn was outstanding. I remember watching him play too. And his rookie year, I remember watching him play, and that was an incredible year for a rookie. But I'm going to go with Doc Gooden, Rookie of the Year 1984. And a major reason that the Mets rose to a World Series in 1986, a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, a sweeping curve. They nicknamed him Dr. K. You know, he had the rooting section where they had the K's up there when he was pitching. He became the youngest pitcher in Major League Baseball history to appear in the All-Star game, striking out the side. You know, he struck out, Jack, Dave Winfield, Reggie Jackson, and George Brett. He won 17 games that year. His final 3 games that year, Gooden set a record with over 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. He finished second in the Cy Young voting, even though he had more wins, more strikeouts, and a lower ERA than Rich Sutcliffe. I agree Fred Lynn had a phenomenal year, and as a position player, I would agree with you. But to have a year like that at 19 years old, Jack, being in New York and having the year he did, and should have had the Cy Young that year, there's no doubt about that. And he helped the Mets rise to the 86 World Series. I'm going with Doc Gooden.
Again, you can't compare. It's hard to compare position player to a pitcher. Very difficult.
Definitely.
Doc, what do you think?
All right. So when you threw the question at me, I thought about it. I had both your guys on my list. I had Fred Lynn, I had Doc Gooden, and then I had 3 other guys. I guess in third place out of my 3 would be Aaron Judge in 2017. He hit 51 or 52 home runs. That was a impressive rookie year. I think my runner-up, though, would be Ted Williams in 1939. I was just looking up Ted Williams' numbers. He drove home 145 runs that year. He hit 327. He had 344 total bases to lead the league. He had 31 homers, 145 RBIs. He had 44 doubles. He walked 107 times. His on-base percentage was .436. That's crazy. But I think if you pick a rookie year and you're going to think about what was the greatest rookie year, I think you also have to consider what was the historical impact of that year. And the Rookie of the Year award is also called the Jackie Robinson Award. And for him to be as great as he was, facing the challenges that he had to face, I don't think you could say that there was a better Rookie of the Year season or person than Jackie Robinson.
That's great points, Doc. Great point.
It's hard to argue against Jackie Robinson because all of the external, pressures coming home from the ballpark, and even his teammates, the majority of them reportedly didn't welcome him as warmly as they should have. I'll take a little exception with Ted Williams. You could argue to me that he was the greatest hitter of all time if you want, but on the defensive side of it, he wasn't good at all. So, and that counts for an awful lot. Think of all the base hits that would fall in right before him in the outfield, balls that a Freddie Lynn would have caught. Those don't show up in the box scores.
That's true, and that's true too. And in my position, think of how many times Doc Gooden would have actually struck out Fred Lynn and Ted Williams. So there you go, guys. But great choices.
I don't think he would have struck out Ted Williams too many times.
I don't know. We'll never find out, Jack. Yeah. And that's the great thing about these debates going back in history, comparing it to modern times. It's all a matter of opinion. And there you go. So next, we have the greatest return to basketball right now and the greatest Celtic in history. And if it was a different team, it could be harder. The Celtics had some Hall of Fame legendary players, as we all know, Cousy, Havlicek, Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, but there is one that stands alone, Jack, and you know who it is. Some call him the greatest basketball player of all time, and that's Bill Russell. 11-time NBA champion. No one's come close yet. 19-time All-Star, 2 championships as a player coach, Jack. And you could say, and you'd be right, he was the first black coach in major USA sports history because he was the coach of the Celtics. 6-time consecutive NBA champion, 4-time rebounding champion, Jack. 6 times with over 1,000 rebounds in one season. One of only 2 players to have over 50 rebounds in one game. Ran the floor, shared the ball, involved in many community civil rights, represented the Celtics professionally and civically. You know, we talk about Jackie Robinson. We talk about the cause today. Bill Russell was involved with all those things back in his day. He just didn't do it on the court, except for maybe one practice game. So, I mean, to me, it's a no-brainer, Jack. I know who you're picking, and he's great, but he ain't no Bill Russell, my friend.
Mac, I mean, it's very admirable what Bill Russell did socially, speaking out about injustices, but that doesn't make him the greatest Celtic player of all time. Player. If you want to say the greatest Celtic person or whatever, we could have a debate on that, even though Bill Russell had
11 championships, Jack. I'm talking about.
You're talking social issues. One of his teammates, Satch Sanders, wanted him to sign a basketball for them after they won an NBA title. All the Celtic teammates would sign it except Bill Russell. And Bill Russell will say, Satch, you know not to ask me to do that. And he never signed the darn ball. But I like Bill Russell nevertheless, a very bright, intelligent guy, well-spoken. And yeah, listen, a great player, obviously. Bill Russell was great at one side of the ball. Phenomenal defensive player. Would force players to change direction on their shots, so on. Great shot blocker. Wouldn't swat the ball out of bounds like Wilt Chamberlain. Would keep it in bounds. Obviously a great rebounder. But on the offensive side of the ball, he wasn't much at all. You could say, well, he averaged 15 points a game. A lot of those, the Celtics were a juggernaut. And when they won those titles, the competition wasn't nearly as great in the NBA as when Larry Bird played. Larry Bird was the greatest Celtic of all time. He had the best all-around game. There was nothing Larry Bird couldn't do. Heck, the guy even averaged double-digit rebounds a game. And that wasn't his thing, rebounding. And he also averaged more assists than Bill Russell. I mean, Larry Bird averaged over 24 points a game, 9 more points than Bill Russell per game. And Larry Bird, you talk about Babe Ruth, we were talking about baseball, calling his shot, pointing to the stands. Larry Bird did it all the time. He'd tell opposing players, okay, I'm going to move to my left, move to my right, then I'm going to take the ball in my left hand, switch it off to my right hand, and take a shot from the corner and swish it right in. And that's what he'd do. I mean, and Larry Bird, you might say, well, he wasn't that good defensively. A lot better than you'd think. I could argue that Larry Bird made the single greatest defensive play in NBA history. Arguably, in the 5th game of the playoffs against the Pistons were about to go up 3-2, and they would have wrapped it up at home in the next game during the playoff series. Isaiah Thomas takes the ball out of bounds, throws it in, and he'd later say Larry Bird was like a streak of lightning. He came across, stole the ball, and then had presence of mind to quickly pass it to Dennis Johnson, who scored on a layup. Greatest defensive play, in my view, that I just about ever saw, along with LeBron's block in the finals, against Golden State. Bill Russell was great. Just one last thing. ESPN kind of agrees with me. They had an all-time greatest thing. Larry Bird was their 6th greatest player of all time, and Bill Russell was 7th. But if someone's going to say Bill Russell, when you look at his accomplishments, I'm not going to argue vehemently against it, but I'm going to give an edge to Larry Bird.
Well, that's all well and good, Jack, about Larry Bird, because he was a tremendous shooter. He was probably a point forward. He ran that team on the floor, no doubt about it. But if Larry Bird went up against Bill Russell on the one-on-one, you know who would win that, right? It wouldn't have been
Larry Bird would win that easy. One-on-one? No, come on. Now, one-on-one at playing a regular game.
He would have blocked probably almost every shot Larry Bird would have took, and he would have out-hustled him for the rebounds. There's no doubt about that.
Larry Bird could have taken 6 steps back and he would have hit shots from half court and one-on-one.
Listen, Bill Russell would have blocked almost every shot he tried. Bill Russell, as a coach, won 2 championships. How many championships did Larry Bird win as a coach, Jack?
Larry Bird had the Indiana Pacers. They were
Right.
successful. They didn't quite win. In the modern NBA, it's much harder. You're not going to get teams go on that run.
It all works out the same, Jack. It's all relative. Listen, Bill Russell led that Celtics team. I don't care who was shooting for him. He's the one that led that team. He made the offense go off the rebounds. He ran the floor. He blocked out arguably the greatest center in the history of basketball, kept him under control. If it wasn't for Bill Russell, they wouldn't have won all those championships, Jack, and you know that. Listen, Larry Bird had Kevin McHale right to his right all the time, and Kevin McHale is arguably one of the greatest Celtics in history. He had the chief underneath.
Bill Russell had John Havlicek.
I'm saying, Jack,
So you mentioned McHale. I'll say John Havlicek was better than Kevin McHale.
I don't know about that either. We'll debate that later. I'm saying Bill Russell overall game with over 1,000 rebounds per season, Jack. How many rebounds did Larry Bird have in 1 year?
He averaged 10 rebounds per game, and rebounding wasn't even his thing.
So
wasn't even his thing, Larry Bird, but he still averaged 10 rebounds a game.
Well, it sure wasn't 1,000, and not six years in a row, Jack. Bill Russell is considered one of the greatest basketball players of all time. Never mind one of the greatest Celtics of all time. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Larry Bird. I watched him. I was in awe of what that man could do on the court. There's no doubt about it. But if you're going to say the greatest Celtic in NBA and Celtic history, the greatest player, not the greatest shooter, the greatest player, it has to be Bill Russell.
Well, Bill Russell's accomplishments, you can't take it away from him. The NBA titles, an NCAA title, an Olympic title. You can call Bill Russell the greatest winner in NBA history for being winning teams and playing a major part in it, obviously. But I'm going to tell you something. If Wilt Chamberlain's Sixers and the other team with the Lakers had won maybe 3-4 additional games and deprived Russell of a couple of less championships and Chamberlain would have gotten a couple of more, we might not even be having a serious discussion on this because then we could point to Wilt's stats.
That's true. It's true. But I know Larry Bird didn't come close to winning not even how many championships did he win, Jack?
Well, they won 3, but he was playing in an era that the competition, he was going against the Showtime Lakers. He wasn't going against the Showtime Lakers. The Celtics could have won those 5 additional championships like Bill Russell. And then they had the bad boy Pistons. The Celtics never had that type of competition.
Well, that's debatable too. Maybe we'll debate that one time. You got any thoughts on that, Dr. Paul?
Yeah, I don't watch basketball, so you're both right. Absolutely. They're both great. And I am in no position to decide who's better, Bill Russell or Larry Bird or Bob Cousy.
Right.
I got to tell you something, Doc. We're talking basketball about Dave DeBusschere. Amazing man, a legendary New York Knicks player, part of their 2 championship teams. But what people don't realize about Dave DeBusschere, they just think of him as a Knick. He was a pitcher for the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, he was. I saw that.
Too. And he coached the Detroit Pistons when he was 24 years old. Can you imagine hiring a 24-year-old to coach?
That's amazing.
I mean, yeah, it really is. I think Danny Ainge, too, on the Celtics. He was a pitcher for the, the Toronto Blue Jays.
I think he was an infielder, but yes, he played for the Blue Jays.
Infield. I'm sorry. Infielder. Yeah,
maybe.
Correction.
I think so. I think he played infield.
Yeah, Danny Ainge, yeah.
Okay, Jack, to go to a different sport. Of course, we're talking about the NFL here, and which coach needs to be fired after this year is over. And you're up first, Jack.
I don't like to see anyone lose their job. Doc, you can relate. You hate for teachers to ever be let go. You hate it. It bothers you to no end.
It's actually the hardest part of the job, to be honest with you, as a principal, because you hire people, you bring them in, and you want them to be successful, and you're rooting for them. And when things
Yeah.
don't work out, it's, people think like, oh, how, you fire somebody, what's that like? That's actually something that grates at you and keeps you up and bothers you for a long, long time as you wrestle with those very tough decisions. That's the worst thing ever.
And then you got the numbers where you're only allowed to keep so much and it's out of your hands. And you see someone you work with and they leave you, you invest time in them, and it's hard. But sometimes, on certain occasions, due to a circumstance, we're talking sports now, we're back to that, you have to cut ties. You just you have to do it. You hear the term, well, change the culture. Sometimes you have to because it wears on you, the lack of success. Adam Gase might be a very nice man, a very nice man. I'm a Jet fan. I wouldn't be happy they're letting him go, a guy losing his job, has a nice family, so on. So I hate to say, oh, fire this guy. But as a Jet fan, this year I've had such a lack of interest. I'm a Jet fan, and I'm not rooting for them to win this year because it could mess up, the future, the number 1 overall pick. And Adam Gase, he at least verbally took responsibility last week. Well, I'm not doing the job. And people might say, wow, that's really he's holding himself accountable. Well, what else is he going to say? The Greg Williams fiasco. He could have called that play off. It went through his headset. He could have said, no, we're not blitzing. He reacted too slowly. Greg Williams got fired for that. Why not Adam Gase? If Adam Gase fired Greg Williams, if that was really his decision, why should I have sympathy on Adam Gase now being fired as well? Because if you could fire another man, why should people be sympathetic towards you? His record, they haven't won a game this year. They were 7-9 last year. They're 0-13 so far. So his record is 7-22. So do the math there. And his track record as the Miami Dolphin coach was poor. If at least he was developing players and there was upside, I'd be good with it. Sam Darnold hasn't developed at all. And that was Adam Gase's job, why he was brought in large part, develop Sam Darnold. Ryan Tannehill, when he was a quarterback with the Dolphins, was a huge disappointment. As soon as he leaves Adam Gase and goes to Tennessee, he becomes their franchise quarterback under another coach. I mean, and I like you say, Mac, you use a Bill Parcells line, you are what your record says you are. And in the case of Adam Gase, I just don't see any progress. They've slid backwards, and a change is certainly in order. Whether the ownership likes him enough to keep him on, that remains to be seen. But from my end, especially if Trevor Lawrence is going to be a quarterback, you got to sometimes start new. And I think in the case of Adam Gase, the Jets really going to have to move on.
Well, I mean, I can't argue with that. The only thing I can do is give you maybe another option because Adam Gase has got to go. I mean, that's pretty much easy answer.
We're talking the whole NFL now.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are. So yeah, because it'd be limited if it was just the locals. Because I think he's really the only one that will be probably leaving. So I'm going to give you a choice that I think will give you some thought, and I think the Chicago's head coach Matt Nagy, and Nagy was hired because he was supposed to be this offensive guru, a lot like Gase, a quarterback coach. Now, the Bears already had a great defense, Jack, and had moved up in the draft to get Trubisky as their franchise quarterback. Now, this is before Nagy got there. A good athlete with a so-so throwing skills. So what does Nagy do? He doesn't build around Nagy. He doesn't use his talent as the Ravens did with Jackson, as the Bills did with Josh Allen, and the Cards have done with Murray. Nagy goes and tries to make this rookie a drop-back quarterback. His game plan doesn't accent his athleticism. Now he already has a Super Bowl caliber defense underneath him. All he has to do is get an offense going, and Trubisky's running capability and strong arm. he doesn't slowly make him into a more accurate quarterback like they did with Josh Allen. They don't find big play receivers to complement his big arm. What do the Bears do? They pick up a quarterback named Nick Foles with a huge contract. I think it was millions of dollars for this year. And with Nick Foles, who is a drop-back quarterback, they can't win either. Now the defense is falling off. The window is closing, and the Bears are a hot mess. They aren't so bad they're on the bottom. They're not, winless, but not good enough to make playoffs. Special teams, especially the kicking game, has made major mistakes. They're unable to make clutch field goals. And whether he likes it or not, that also falls on the head coach. The GM and Nagy, they seem to be at odds in the direction of the team and quarterbacks. And it's at least half Nagy's fault. So Gase has inherited a bad team, Jack. Adam Gase didn't get a great team, a great defense. He didn't get a special teams that scored. He got a bad team to begin with, and they asked him to make it better. Well, they went 7-9 last year. I don't know if that was because of Adam Gase or if it was just out of maybe it was just coincidence. And I think Gase will get another year, believe it or not. I think the Jets will stick with Gase, but I have a feeling, Jack, Nagy is gone next year, and I think that's why he's a coach that needs to go.
Let me tell you, this is Matt Nagy's third year as head coach of the Chicago Bears. And his record is 26-19. 26-19. That doesn't come out at me as a man that you have to let go. That's not bad. It's not like the Bears have this overwhelmingly great personnel. They have good defense. I understand that and all. And they're 6-7 this year so far. 3 games to go. What happens if they win 2 of their last 3 and they finish 8-8?
Then they'll
quite possible. That's not exactly a train wreck.
then they'll
We
keep.
have to drive a guy out of town. Yeah, there's a quarterback controversy. There's a quarterback controversy on a lot of teams. Does that mean we have to let the coach go? Mitch Trubisky has let him down to a degree. So he hears the public pressure. He hears ownership. If Mitch Trubisky's not playing well, they have an alternative in Nick Foles they can go to. So he can't keep sticking with Mitch Trubisky. They're trying to develop him. It goes back and forth. Granted, they have to settle this quarterback controversy by next year. But if you look at the man's whole body of work, he's 6. Once again, his record's 6-7 right now this year, and 26-19 overall. He must really, unless he's feuding with the front office, if there's dissension going on behind the scenes we don't know about, that's another matter. That's a reason maybe to let him go. But strictly based on his coaching performance and nothing else, it doesn't merit letting him go. I mean, or at the very least, he shouldn't be atop the list of potential coaching changes.
Well, Jack, that 26-19 record is a lot to do with the defense side of the ball. The Chicago offense has been in positions to win a lot more games than that. And they brought in Nick Foles because Nagy couldn't bring Trubisky up to the caliber that they think he could be. They brought in that pocket quarterback for that system he runs. And Nick Foles hasn't won a game with him.
I love you, Doc. You blame him for the offensive woes, but give him no credit for the defensive end of it. Same thing when Doc's sound went out. You were about to blame me for it, wanting to know what I did.
The defense was good before Nagy got there, Jack. The defense was already good. The defense was a Super Bowl caliber defense. And now with them being on the field,
Mitch Trubisky wasn't good before Nagy got there, and he's continuing not to be good.
Well, I'm just telling you, that was his job. That's why they hired him. That they hired him.
They hired him to win games. That's what they hired him for.
They hired him because he was an offensive guru who was supposed to be good with quarterbacks, sort of like, I guess, Adam Gase.
Same idea.
All I'm saying, Jack, is they're going to be mediocre. And this is where they're going to be for the next 5 years with Matt Nagy, and their window is closing. They have a great defense.
Trubisky played well beating the Houston Texans. So let's
Well,
see. Maybe he's got it together.
We'll see. We'll see. But I have a feeling they'll be 7-9 like the Jets, and next year they're going to be maybe winless. So we'll see what happens.
No, not the Jets.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Doc? You got any comments on that?
I think the idea with Adam Gase is that it's been a disaster. He wasn't brought in to great fanfare. When he was brought in, people were questioning why he was brought in. Again, I'm not a big NFL guy. I just, remember the stories when he was brought in, and he didn't have the greatest of track records in Miami. And obviously the Jets haven't performed with him, and they're winless. I think the worst thing he could do is, and it would be typical Jets for them to do this, is to go out and win their last three games, 2 or 3 games or whatever, and to pull off a couple of things and all of a sudden lose the number 1 pick. That's typically what the Jets seem to do, is they always seem to make the wrong decisions. And what they need to do is, if they get the number 1 pick and they bring in the best player, and they keep a quarterback, a coach who has been failing, I think that would be a bad decision. I think at this point you need to break it down, start over again. But what they need to do is find a coach who has a reputation for being good, who they can keep there for many years, because that's part of the Jets' problem. It's every 3 years or so, somebody's in, somebody's out. They're trying this new plan. They're trying this new quarterback. This is the guy. That's the guy. It's Sanchez. It's not Sanchez. It's Darnold. It's somebody else. And the team seems to never really have a direction. So,
well, Doc, you bring up a great point. Is the Jets' problem not the coaching? Is it the management? I mean, if they're bringing in, I don't know how many coaches changes they've had in the last 10 years. I know it's multiple. And the mess up they had with Adams, with Le'Veon Bell, their defense letting Williams go. I mean, that's not Adam Gase's fault. That's not something he does. He doesn't handle the free agency, letting certain players go. There was a good wide receiver with the Jets that's not playing very well for another team. And
Robbie Anderson,
they don't have any weapons around Darnold at all. I mean, their receivers are average to below average. Their defensive backs are terrible. Their defensive line is terrible. And a lot of times as a coach, you got to, deal with what you have. So I'm not going to give it all on Adam Gase. I don't think he's a good coach. I don't believe that. But I don't believe he was set up for success.
No, I think you're right.
And that's why I kind of went to Nagy, because I think Nagy was set up for success. I think he had the defense. All he needed to do was bring the offense along, which is what he didn't do. Where Adam Gase didn't have a defense, he didn't have a special teams. He just threw them in the soup and said, "Hey, go ahead, and make it taste good." And a lot of times, and I guess it's with every team, it has a lot to do with how you work out with the GM and the upper management, as well as it does the players on the field. So.
I'm surprised you didn't mention Anthony Lynn. Not that I'm necessarily a proponent of him getting let go, because this is his 4th season. They won Thursday night.
Yeah.
They're 5-9. They could conceivably win their next 2 and finish the year 7-9, which isn't terrible. And they have made the playoffs in 2 of the 4 years he would have been there. But some of his moves, his on-field decisions have been absolutely horrendous. And he deserves no credit for Justin Herbert having a great rookie year, none at all, because he intended to keep Herbert on the bench and play Tyrod Taylor all of this year. And if Tyrod Taylor played well, he would have continued to play him. So it was by accident that Justin Herbert found his way onto the field game 1, and that he's been a phenom is no doing of Anthony Lynn. So I don't want to see him get any credit there.
I definitely considered him too, Jack. There's a few I did look at it, the Philadelphia head coach. I mean, there's a few that I looked at that might and should be fired.
Let me tell you, back in the day, Doc, if we were having this debate, myself and Mac would have been calling for Bill Parcells to be fired after his rookie year. The guy's obviously can't handle the pressure of the situation, and he'd point out to the Giants' record.
Wow, you got a lot of faith in me, Jack. I'll tell you.
He had a terrible rookie year. Remember Bill Parcells? Terrible.
Hey, Doc, can you stick with us for the rest of the show if you can? We'll
Actually,
have you.
I gotta run.
Okay, it's been a pleasure again. Thank you,
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Dr. Paul Semendinger, with the blog Start Spreading the News, famous author, and we love having him in every week. Very knowledgeable in a lot of sports. Thank you again, Doc.
Have a good week, Doc.
So there you go, Dr. Paul Semendinger. Always a treat to have him on every Saturday. He adds a lot to the show, and especially with his baseball and Yankee knowledge. So we're going to get our final timeout in here, Jack, and we'll go ahead and be back on the other side, folks. We got the greatest power forward in local sports history, New York, Boston, and Philly, and who has the best outlook for the NHL amongst the locals. And Jack's going to tell us who's better. So that's coming up right after break. Stick with us, folks.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about her new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Info Line. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again?
Alex is just
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show on Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 10 a.m. I'm your host, Mac, with your co-host, Jack Hirsch, and we just got off the off video conference, I guess you'd call it, with our big guest Saturday, which was Dr. Paul Semendinger. Great with Yankees history and great with insight into Major League Baseball, Jack. It's always a pleasure having
Yeah,
him.
oh yeah.
Yeah,
I was hoping we'd have some news this week, but maybe next week.
Yeah, maybe that'll get done, and then we'll be able to talk about it one way or the other anyway. So hopefully that does get done with LeMahieu. Just a quick update for the viewers and listeners out there. Again, Fanatics sponsors the show. Check them out at our link at our website at macandjacksports.com, bstbreaks.com. Another great sports site store where you can click on that and check out their deals. If you use the MacJack code, MACJACK, when you purchase something, you'll get an extra $10 off. They're already low prices. They have a huge giveaway coming up at the end of January where they're giving away a lot of stuff, folks. So check it out with Christmas coming. It's a great site. And if you want to advertise with the Mac and Jack Sports Show, just go to macman.121062 at yahoo.com. Send an email and we'll get back to you. Jack, we got a lot of things coming up in the near future here. We got some really big guests coming up next week. We have somebody from your guest that you booked for the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
Philadelphia boxing promoter Russell Peltz.
We have him coming on. We also have a pretty popular podcast from Connecticut called The Safety and the Sports Writer. They have a really good podcast. They'll be joining us next Wednesday. It's great having them coming in and sharing some time with us. So we got that. I'm working on a couple athletes. Jack, I just messaged someone and hopefully we can get him on. I'm not going to give out the name until I got him. So we'll see if we can get him on. Apologize a little bit for my raspiness. I've been under the weather a little bit and my voice isn't as.
You sound well, Mac. Don't sell yourself short.
Thank you very much, Jack. I appreciate one of the few compliments you give me during the show. So we're going to go with the greatest power forward in local history, Jack. I get to go first in this debate. And I mentioned him a little while ago, and his name is Kevin McHale. He was the power forward for the Boston Celtics. Of course, a 3-time NBA champion, a 7-time NBA All-Star, 6-time NBA defensive team. He had over 17,000 points, over 7,000 rebounds, almost 1,700 blocks. In his first year as a starter on the team, they finished with an 82-18 record. His low post game was almost unstoppable, Jack, if you remember the moves he made down low. Hardly anybody could cover him. During the two Houston Celtic finals, McHale led all scorers with over 25 points per game. He called it the torture chamber, Jack, where, you would go in the low post with Kevin McHale and his leaping, spinning. He was outmaneuvering defenders. It was unbelievable. He's the first player in history to shoot 80% from the field and 83.6% from the throw line. He had an incredible outside shot, too. Even Charles Barkley said of McHale he was the best player he ever played against, unstoppable offensively, and gave him nightmares defensively. And that's why I picked him over some of the other power forwards, because his defense, Jack, his defense was awesome. Yes, I know you're shaking your head and smiling.
I'm laughing. The best Barkley said Kevin McHale was the best player ever played against. He played against Michael Jordan. He said Kevin McHale was the best.
This was his quote, Jack. And of course, Barkley played the same position as McHale, so I don't think Barkley went up against Jordan one-on-one like he did McHale. But he said he was unstoppable and gave him nightmares on defense. That's a direct quote from Charles Barkley, Jack.
Kevin McHale was a great forward, but we're talking power forward.
Right.
Power forward. Kevin McHale had somewhat of a power game, but he wasn't really a power forward. He was as much a finesse forward as anything he did by force. When I think power forward, I think of someone who does things by force. Now, Charles Barkley reminds me of weight divisions in boxing. And weight divisions in boxing, they talk about the greatest pound for pound. But in basketball, they don't. If they did in basketball, Charles Barkley would be considered the greatest player of all time if you factor in his height. He has the most rebounds in history for any player that's under 6'6". Now, Charles Barkley, we're talking about locally. He played 8 years for the 76ers out of his 16-year career. They did retire his number. His stats, they dwarf Kevin McHale's. Kevin McHale averaged slightly under 18 points per game. Charles Barkley averaged a little over 22. Charles Barkley averaged close to 12 rebounds a game. Kevin McHale a little over 7. Heck, Charles Barkley even averaged more assists, nearly 3 more assists a game. Unlike Kevin McHale was never league MVP. He was never the best player on his team, not even close. Barkley at one point, he was the franchise player for the 76ers. He was the league MVP in 1993. He was the All-Star Game MVP in 1991. McHale was a 7-time All-Star. Barkley was an 11-time All-Star. And Barkley was a member of the Dream Team. You know what Christian Laettner said at one point, and he had to correct himself. He said Charles Barkley's the best player on our team. And then when the interviewer said, better than Jordan, and then he caught himself, Christian Laettner says, well, I guess you have to give an edge to Michael, but Charles is nearly as good. That was the ultimate compliment. Charles Barkley was fierce under those boards. When you talk power forward, it's Charles Barkley. If you want to talk who was a better player, maybe you could debate it a little more. I still think it would be Barkley, but you could debate it a little more. But Charles Barkley was absolutely the best power forward in local history.
I can't disagree with you, Jack. All I can tell you is what Charles Barkley said about Kevin McHale. And yes, Kevin McHale, it was a little bit more finesse. He was going to take it and slam it. But you also got to take in consideration that Kevin McHale played with probably the best, well, you could argue the best forward in history, at Larry Bird, who was a shooting forward for the most part. I mean, he got his rebounds and stuff, and he did play a little defense. But defensively, McHale was unbelievable, Jack. I mean, if you want to talk about, he was 6'10". He had an unbelievable amount of blocks. He was almost a center playing forward with a great touch. I think he was ahead of his time, as a matter of fact, as you see a lot of big guys moving out now and shooting. And Kevin had a great shot. I can't argue with how big and a player and how strong that Barkley was. I can't argue that. All I can argue is that when the biggest spotlight came on, Kevin McHale, he shined. I mean, he led all scorers in them 2 Houston Celtic games. He even had more points than Larry Bird. So, I mean, I agree with you to the point that if you're talking about the statue of a power forward, an aggressive, strong man.
Power forward, yeah.
Right. I would definitely do that. But that's the position Kevin McHale played because Larry Bird played small forward. So it's not his fault he played with Larry Bird, Jack.
Listen, Barkley took on Charles Oakley in a physical altercation to fight him. So yes. Charles Barkley never backed down, was never intimidated. I couldn't see Kevin McHale ever doing that. If Charles Oakley came at him, he would back up and let someone like Robert Parrish handle it for him.
Well, believe it or not, against the Pistons, McHale did start a couple fights, Jack. I mean, he was not scared of anybody. I wouldn't, if I was McHale, I probably wouldn't mess with Barkley either.
He clotheslined Kurt Rambis, and then he hid behind the wall of players.
Well, Kurt was a tough guy too. So I mean,
yeah, he was.
Maybe he's smart too. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, if you're going to talk about the power forward being aggressive and strong to the hoop, Barkley would be better than him. But I'm talking about as far as defensively as well as offensively, and playing with Larry Bird on your team, it kind of takes the shine away from you a little bit. So, good choice on I think on Kevin McHale, and a great choice on Barkley. So there you go. So something that I'm not sure of, we're going to debate real quick, Jack, before we get to who's better, and that's the best outlook for an NHL team. You go first. Mine will be brief. I guarantee you that.
Wow, I got to be brief if we're going to continue. I'm reconnecting with hockey. I used to be a big fan. Like I was a big WWE fan, and I fell out of the loop with the WWE. For a while, I fell out of the loop with hockey. Watching the playoffs last year in the NHL, I really enjoyed it, especially the Islanders beating the Philadelphia Flyers. And, the Flyers kind of really intrigued me. The Islanders seemed to beat them because they just outskated them. They were just a little quicker to the puck from what I could see. The Flyers, their head coach, Andy Vignault, that was his first full season with the team. And last year I noticed the Flyers, until they had a 5-month stoppage during the season because of the pandemic, they were the hottest team in the league.
Yeah.
And when the NHL season resumed, kind of like the Milwaukee Bucks in the NBA, they never quite got back to where they were.
Definitely.
I got to believe that Flyer team before the stoppage would have beaten the Islanders, and they exceeded expectations for the season. Some of their players, like their center Nolan Patrick, who missed the all of last season, he should be back this year at some point. That's going to help. Carter Hart, their goalie, is on the way to being, the best goaltender in the league. And I don't have to tell you, if you have the best goalie in the league, you're halfway to the Stanley Cup right there. They were smart enough to sign Ivan Provorov, their defenseman, and Travis Konecny, their forward. Both of them are emerging stars. They signed them to extensions. So both guys are going to be in a very good frame of mind. And it seems like all systems go that the Flyers are going to make a serious run for the Stanley Cup.
And I wouldn't disagree with that, Jack. I would just add to it the Boston Bruins with a 44-17 record this last year. And again, they were another team that was affected by the bubble. They have a great veteran team. They were the best in home last year at 22-4-9. The bubble affected them there. They need a couple, maybe a couple free agents and their draft picks to work out. And when Jack Studnicka returns to Boston, it will make them that much better. Two teams, the Flyers and Boston, who were great at home, and the bubble definitely affected them. And I can't.
Just one quick thing about the Bruins. We're talking about not the most points in the regular season. I'm talking about who's going to go furthest for the Stanley Cup. If not win it, which team's going to go furthest? We didn't mention the Islanders or Rangers who really should be in the discussion, and I wouldn't put the Sabres or Devils in the discussion. But I will say this: in the last 3 years, two of those years, the Bruins got eliminated in the playoffs by the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Right.
The Tampa Bay Lightning are the defending Stanley Cup champions. And they don't look any worse for wear. They look just as strong as they've ever been. And that's going to be the Bruin boogeyman when they go up against the Lightning again.
It could be. I think it's going to have a lot to do whether they play in the bubble this year or not, too, Jack, on both teams, because they both got tremendous home records and they both feed off their home fans better than any other two teams. The Rangers made an unbelievable run last year with the bubble in the playoffs. The Islanders not as far. But the Rangers have an exciting young team. So do the Islanders. And, of course, the Sabres always start off hot.
Well, the Islanders made that great run last year.
The Rangers, I think the Rangers are the ones that beat
the Flyers.
The Rangers are the ones that beat the Flyers, Jack. So
No. The Islanders beat the Flyers.
I don't think so, Jack.
Yeah.
All right, check it out. I think you might not be right, but we'll see. So we really don't have enough time to go on who's better or what's better, but I'm going to throw one at you, Jack, and because we don't have a lot of time. Which is better, the World Series or the Super Bowl, Jack?
The Super Bowl. Because the Super Bowl is a national party. It's one and done. The World Series, a number of different games. Now, the Super Bowl has so much more betting on it, even fun betting. Not that I encourage betting. No, the Super Bowl is everyone looks forward. It's called Super Sunday. It's a national holiday. No, not the World Series. It's got to be the Super Bowl.
I don't know. I figured you'd say World Series. See, you always throw me for a loop, Jack, because you are a big baseball advocate.
I am, but the Super Bowl is unlike any other thing.
Okay, so there you go, folks. That's it for our Saturday debate show. Thanks for joining us. Tomorrow we'll be on our big football show where we have guest Anthony Servino, our fantasy football expert from Fantasy Football Face-Off, and Robert Butler from Sportsbook. Both do a tremendous job on the show for us. And we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy your Saturday and have a great day, everybody.